All right, evening, gang, and welcome to another thrilling episode of Pitch Slap. Me and Dan are joined here today with our friend, master chef and writer extraordinaire, as well as actor, Mr. Robert Mix. Last week he shared his lovely debut story. I hope you check that out. And we're going to hear from our very own Dan the Man with what he's cooking.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. So I have this story that's been on the back burner for about a year. It's a ghost story. Surprise, surprise. And the premise is it's just about a creepy treehouse that two young girls have an experience with, and their experience follows them into adulthood. So I'll read it. It's pretty short. I'll try to get through it quick. And then you guys could say what you want. Okay. So this right now is tentatively called What Gets Left Behind. Okay. Among the many things they were excited to find in their new home, the sisters were most excited about the treehouse. The treehouse was hidden high up in an oak tree at the edge of the lawn, hundreds of lush leaves masking it from view. Emily and Nat might have missed it, but the girls were adventurous, and upon seeing their new backyard for the first time, made it their life's mission to explore every inch of it. Nat was the one who had discovered it first, that much is clear. She and Em had been spinning in circles in their backyard, colliding into, then collapsing onto each other in a fit of giggles. Nat had been looking up, watching the trees, the clouds, the sky blend together in a dizzy blur, when she spotted something in the branches above her. Ribbons, hundreds of red ribbons twirling in the breeze. Just as the spinning slowed and her mind began racing to make sense of this, that's when the treehouse swirled into view. "Look," Nat pointed, and before she or Em could say another word, they were stumbling to the old oak tree, ready to investigate. Both sisters agreed that it was the most glorious treehouse they'd ever seen. It didn't really look like a treehouse at all, not with its neat, squarish design, thatched roof, and windows. Sorry, that sentence was wrong. It did not look like a treehouse at all, not with those neat, squarish designs, thatched roofs, and windows. No, this looked much more like a castle or a tower. It closed around the tree in a narrow sort of circle, barely wide enough to hold a body, but with walls high and windowless that splintered upward into a weathered parapet, which looked like a crown of thorns. From the crown sprouted branches, gnarled arms outstretched, offering their leaves to the sky above. And on these branches, the ribbons were tied, dangling like apple skins from the tree. And carved at the base of the treehouse, into the floor where someone might stand, was the entrance, a hole just big enough to let in a small child. There had been no argument as to who would get to crawl in first. Emily was easily frightened by new experiences, new foods, new games, new places. All of them scared her, until her older sister had first given a stamp of approval. So naturally, the responsibility fell to Nat. There was just one problem. There was no way to get up to the tree, no ladder, no rope that they could use to climb and get into the castle. This was only a temporary challenge, one that the girls were eager to overcome. They devised a rather clever solution. It was Em's idea. Using an old rope they discovered in the shed, Nat fashioned a lasso, which, after several tosses, caught hold of a high branch in the tree. The other end of the rope, Nat looped around her belt. The plan was simple. First, Nat would scale her way up to the treehouse, and then, after much reassurance, Emily would follow suit. As Natalie climbed, she imagined she was a fairy tale prince on his way to save Rapunzel, pulling himself up by her golden hair. This idea filled her with excitement as she inched closer and closer to the mouth of the treehouse. But then, mid-climb, she stopped, suddenly reminded of how Rapunzel's story ended. In the end, the prince had been tricked. In the end, the prince had climbed Rapunzel's tower, only to find a witch waiting for him inside. This made Nat think. Who might she find at the end of this rope? A princess or a witch? Just as this dreadful thought settled in her mind, there was a noise from overhead. a quiet, deliberate noise, like the sound of a rake when it's dragged ever so gently across a plot of dead earth. The noise was coming from within the walls of the treehouse. Nat looked up into the mouth of the treehouse, trying to make sense of the dark that stared back at her. The dark would give away none of its secrets. It merely sighed a thin stream of cool air which gave Nat goosebumps all over. She was overcome with the sudden desire to climb down, to run away from the tree, to hide in her bedroom, and to never come outside ever again. But Nat did not move. She stayed fixed to the spot as the raking sound moved closer and closer. Down below, little Emily watched distractedly, her mind consumed with future adventures she and Nat would share in their castle. Like Nat, she thought about princesses and princes, but also pirates. In her mind's eye, she was brave as a knight, brandishing her sword, hopping from branch to branch, fighting off the pirates who were trying to enter the castle, trying to plunder all the treasures hidden within. She wondered if there really were any treasures within, whether the previous owners had left anything behind for them to find. Her heart leapt at the thought, and she wished her sister would hurry so that she could see what was inside. That's when she noticed. Nat had stopped climbing. She was hanging there, high up in the tree, still as a stone. She was so close to the castle, too. If she were to outstretch her arm, she might have touched it. Why had she stopped? Then Em saw it. 2 glistening red eyes in the mouth of the treehouse, staring down at her sister. Just as the eyes flickered into view, that's when Nat started thrashing at the rope. Natalie had felt it, imperceptibly at first, and then with a jolt. Something had hold of the other end of the rope. Something was trying to hoist her up the tree. Somewhere below, far below, Nat could hear Emily scream, and that's when she really started to panic, scrambling against the rope, kicking at the tree, trying to loosen the iron grip of whatever was holding her above. Let me go, Nat thought. Let me go. In an instant, the rope slackened, and Nat lurched downwards. Something cold brushed against her as she dropped. Then, with the snap of her belt, Nat kept falling and falling until she hit the ground with a loud crack. After the incident, Em and Nat's fathers were furious, throwing around angry words. How could you be so careless? You're lucky you didn't die. Neither father held on to that anger very long, recognizing their daughter's fear. That day, when they found Emily screaming, pointing up, and then they saw the rope dangling from the tree, both fathers had feared the worst. What they found was still really bad. Natalie was lying unconscious on the ground, ashen-faced, her leg bent at Frankenstein angles. Her first break. They wondered if Nat would ever walk right again, even after the doctors assured them that she would heal just fine. And poor Emily had watched everything, watched her sister fall. And as she'd been carried away from that tree, she had screamed in terror. Both girls had clearly been traumatized. Their fathers felt the pain that all parents feel when they come to realize time and time again how they cannot save their children from all the little and big pains the world has to offer. So they made a deal with Emily and Nat. They would build the girls their own treehouse on one condition. To their credit, Natalie and Emily never did play by the old treehouse again. Sure, their new treehouse didn't look like a castle, but from the safety of their new kingdom at the far opposite end of the lawn, Natalie and Emily enjoyed a happy childhood. And as the sisters grew up, the terror that coiled around their memories of that treehouse loosened. They'd come to see the treehouse as a fixture of amusement, a ghost story they could tell their friends at parties and eventually to their own children. As with many tales of the supernatural, their story grew in size and imagination. Natalie claimed that she had heard a voice whisper to her as she climbed the rope. Emily swore that she saw tangles of hair threaded in the ribbons of the tree. They argued playfully with each other over what it was they encountered that day. Calling it a witch wore out its charm, but a ghost, ghoul, demon, these monsters served their story well. But in their heart of hearts, both girls knew that the treehouse never posed any real harm to them in the first place. The girls never did play by the old treehouse, but they did go there often as in their childhood. On nights they could not fully recall until their bodies ached with old age, and their memories became finicky, questionable things. Nights when, carried by the warm clutches of sleep, they would toddle out of their beds, down the stairs, and out into the moonlit backyard, the dead leaves crunching underfoot as they made their way to the old oak tree. There they would climb, their hands and feet moving methodically up the rungs of a ladder only they could find during those midnight wanderings. The sisters would climb until they were eventually swallowed by the dark mouth of the castle in the tree. At times throughout their lives, Natalie and Emily could almost remember these nights, and times when they found themselves alone in darkness. Then they could almost feel an icy stare upon them, could almost make out the impression of the figure crouching in the dark, could almost hear its faint scratching against the walls. That's it. So it was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. Sorry about that, but that's my story.
No, man, that's awesome.
Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, I really like that.
Thank you, Rob.
No problem.
I like this notion, right? Like the little big pains in the world, right? You mentioned that parents, obviously are concerned about their kids, and it's like, you can't always put words to what those are, right? And what someone might be a monster to someone else might just be like, oh, you scraped your knee on the sidewalk, right? Like big little pains. And then the other thing you talk about, right, is what lives in there, right? Like monsters need homes too. You know what I mean? Like they have somewhere they reside. And a tree house, right? Theoretically, you look at it and you're like, oh, everyone wants a tree house. I wanted a tree house. Never got a tree house. Plenty of other kids want tree houses. I'm sure you maybe wanted a tree house, right? Rob, you probably thought dope tree house would be dope.
Yeah, everyone wants tree houses, but like no one knows why they want a tree house. They just want a tree house.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's part of the allure, the mystery. Why do I want that? What's up there? And you've kind of like, this is why you don't want a treehouse, because you don't know what could live in that, because it's kind of like a house.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So like one thing like the story like gave to me was like, is the monster real or not? Like, is there a definitive answer for like, is the monster real or not? Like is the monster real, Dan?
So that's a good question. I would say yeah, based on so it's something I was conscious of while writing this. It's been a while since I read it, and so I'm having memories. So when I wrote it, I was thinking, do I want it to be real? Do I not want it to be real? Do I want it to be ambiguous? But I think at the end, something is, even though they've kind of like shrugged it off, like, oh, it was nothing, like something has been following them, so I don't know.
I mean, I like that. I like the ambiguous nature of it because, like, I don't know, for someone like who like loves horror movies but also hates horror movies, like I always think that's a great trope when like when they go through something as kids and they're like they grow up and it's like, no, that didn't really happen to us. Like we're crazy, but like at the same time, it's like, did it really happen to us? I always kind of like that, like the playing with your expectations. Was it just a random branch in the tree, or did something try to kill us as children? I mean.
Yeah. Good question, though. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, I think that's honestly that might be the best answer. It's like because then it's about what the story meant to you as a reader. Like, how did you interpret it? Because
how did you interpret it, Rob?
Oh, there's definitely a monster in that treehouse.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with Rob. Definitely a monster in the treehouse. But I think you also use a lot of very nice imagery and description when you describe the tree, right, as the kids are looking up to it, right? I think there's a line you said something like the tree looks like it's embracing them, right? Like two branches look like arms, like hugging them, something in that nature. So, like, you make it seem like, oh, this is childhood, right? It's a friendly, curious thing, but, like, there are also horrors that lurk in there, right? So you're teetering with that whole coming-of-age horror, cohesiveness, and that's just good. It's just good.
I guess I was thinking, thinking back to like Rob's story about like trauma. You know what I mean? This isn't nearly as traumatic as watching someone die, but like I feel like when we're kids, like there are like small moments of trauma that just like stick with us, even if we don't remember it. Like it just like carries on with us. So even if we leave it behind, if we don't remember it, it still follows us. So that's what I was thinking.
No, and this is practical in a lot of ways, because how many times do people say, like, oh, I saw aliens, or they claim they've seen ghosts, or things like that? I'm not trying to make it sound ridiculous, but people have said they've experienced things that aren't quite of this world. You know what I mean? Like Rob said, and they joke, like, no, that didn't really happen, but it's like, you're only saying that to make yourself feel better, because that happened to you, right? Even if other people don't agree with you because you want to fit in. So that is something that could happen to somebody. You know what I mean? I also think this would be a perfect medium for like a short film. If you were ever to possibly think of doing that, I think you'd make it a very good short film.
I can see that.
Yeah, I think it could be a pretty good short film. Maybe you could direct it, Stefan. You could direct it. You can
be honored.
You can get people. I think Rob and I should be the little girls.
Obviously.
That would be perfect.
Yeah.
That would be perfect. Yeah, no, all we really need is a treehouse, and we'd be good. So if you know anyone with a treehouse, we can make this.
I don't know any person with a treehouse.
I have 2 little girls, and I'm not saying that's weird. My sisters could play the 2 little girls, and then we would just need 2 people to play the dads, and then 1 person to be the monster in a treehouse. Those are the only things we need.
But like, who has a treehouse? Like who? No one. No one has a tree.
That's what's holding us back right now. So Dan, we will find this answer.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be willing to get their lovely childhood treehouse become like this monstrous place. So,
unfortunately,
we offered them money, then everything will change.
That's true.
But no, man, really good story, really good tale.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you guys know of Neil Gaiman at all.
I've heard of him.
Yeah.
I know you've talked a couple times. Is that someone who inspired you?
Yeah, so this started out, I was trying to copy Neil Gaiman. He's got a short story about a Jack-in-the-Box that's haunted, and, how it sort of goes like through similar beats, like the kids find this Jack-in-the-Box and they play with it, and like they think it's just like this harmless toy, and then the story tells us like they had been visiting they had been going upstairs to see the Jack-in-the-Box, and what they couldn't get to come out before comes out at night to them and kind of like haunts them. So it's a very short story from Neil Gaiman. I was like, oh, I'm gonna do like my own spin on that, and then I couldn't do one. So this is what emerged. But I highly recommend if you need a little bit of creepiness in your life, Neil Gaiman. He wrote Coraline. He wrote American Gods. He's pretty prolific. So go to him first. I would be happy to be compared as like a third-rate Neil Gaiman.
I don't know. Your thing sounds way better than a Jack-in-the-Box, so I think you're on the right trail.
His was way better. I didn't do it justice, but yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it.
No problem. Our pleasure.
Definitely.
Yeah. So thank you for anyone who's watched. I just got pitch slapped. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Rob, for listening. And join us next week for another thrilling episode.
Peace out.